Welcome back to the channel. We hope you're safe and well.
On the left hand side you can see the embankment, and as Gavin pans round you can see this is where bridge number 21 was. Unfortunately there's nothing left of it, and as I said, I've got no pictures of it, I'm afraid. We are now just south of bridge number 21 on the embankment they built. As Gavin pans round again, you'll better see the Lower Luton Road, and quite clearly the embankment as it goes up into the fields. We are now heading towards Luton in open countryside.
We're standing on the track bed now, and you can tell that we're on the embankment by the height differences. Andy tells me in March that this was clear when he walked through, but here we are in summer and the stingers are out. Notice the concrete fence line again as you look down the embankment.
Would have been wires running through, and that picture we took off earlier on was the tensioner.
Yeah.
To pull it all through.
Yeah, imagine having to use a pair of pliers to do that instead.
Oh.
We are walking on history.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah, this is history. This is, you know, you can imagine the earthworks and all that, and
yeah, just to support,
all done by hand.
Yeah, just to support the trains themselves, you know, the weight of them.
This is now open fields. As Gavin pans round, you can see just where we've come from, the embankment, and now we're into literally open fields here. There is absolutely nothing here to say that it was a railway line. In Geoff and Sue's first book, they actually mention it. There's parts now where you just wouldn't imagine a rail line to be. However, if you happen to know a little bit of geology, you can see quite clearly there's a patch of tough grass there and a touch of tough grass there. That would have been, that's not normal. That's not normal in a field. That's because when the ground is put back after there's been encutment, you get pockets of water, and you can, although you can't really see it, as we point straight through there, this is where the track would have gone.
So we just walked into that little area, and it becomes quite apparent that you are on the track, because you can see the bush to the left, the bush to the right, where they've filled it in. Of course, water's got trapped, and that's why there's foliage growing above. We're just walking through the track bed now, evidenced by the foliage to our left, but through the distance there you can just see the gap between the trees where the railway went through.
Indeed.
It becomes quite obvious that the track was here when you start walking through the tree line. But clearly to the left and to the right you can see the gap.
Big trees that have been here over 100 years. I can tell a story or two.
Andy did say to me that when he came through here previously there were many cows and many cow deposits. So
indeed.
They aren't here today, we're pleased to say.
Standing on almost the same location today, you can actually see a picture here taken in the middle of the field of a London and North Eastern. I would say that's probably an N7 again, with a passenger train heading down towards Luton. As you can see, it looks the correct way round for a locomotive. Again, I'll explain all in a minute. But this is the middle of the field, and if I just pan away, this is the same spot today.
So over the back there, to the top left of this shot, are those trees. Although we've got some trees growing in front for view, but those are the trees in the photo.
Just here is the 1923 Ordnance Survey map. X marks the spot where I'm absolutely convinced that we are standing, and you can see by the track bed it is actually in a slight cutting. You can see by the little crosses here, the little ticks there, is in a cutting that we have just walked along. It's very difficult now to actually get to see the track bed itself, but in winter time, when it's all the foliage is gone, you can actually make out the track bed. We are now going to walk from the X down through the field to Copthall Lane, bridge number 20. We have now reached Copthall Lane, where bridge number 20 stands. As Gavin pans round, you can quite clearly see there are actually two bridges here. The one in the front of us is bridge number 20, the original branch line, and behind it I would say is probably bridge 129, maybe 128, which is now the Midland Mainline. The reason this bridge is still here is because it helps keep the embankment up of the Midland Mainline. But as we walk underneath, you can quite clearly see the structure of this. It's actually built on a slight skew, in other words, a slight angle. It is not square on, but you can see the architecture, the amount of work that went in to these bridges was substantial. And we must remember, these were all hand built, and the bridge is 160, 170 years old and is still in remarkable condition. As you can see, you have the brick wall coming up, and just at the top there you can see there's a little bit sticking out. You will see on every brick bridge there is, especially if it's an arch bridge, is what they would have done, they would have built the wall up, got as far as there, then they would have put a wooden frame over the top. On top of that wooden frame, they would have built the brick arch. Once the cement and all that was dried, they took the wood out, and there you go, that's the bridge. Still in amazing condition after all these years. Yeah, there's the sign, bridge number 20 from Welling.
Closed.
Bit overgrown.
Yeah.
Yes, closed. Now, as Gavin pans round, this is quite interesting because here you can see the abutment of now the Midland Bridge, which they incorporated into the brickwork of bridge number 20. As I said, this is bridge number 129 or 128. It happens to be 128. Again, this bridge, St Pancras 1, number 128, number 128 from St Pancras. You can see it's quite a big tunnel because it's now a 4-track main line. We've walked from the X marks the spot, along the field, over the gate to where Copthall Bridge is, number 20. We'll now walk back up to here to roughly this spot here. Now this spot here is where the cycle route actually comes back onto the original track bed, and we're going to walk along the embankment and over the bridge.
We turn into the track bed, trusty old concrete post, and away we go again. We've come back to where we were. Now that we're back on the track, you can see the second bridge for the Midland, and as we come through, this is bridge number 20. There's the top of it, the brick wall, as we step across it. It's a fantastic day. The sun is on our side, but unfortunately there's foliage everywhere.
It's almost impossible to think that this was taken in this location, but it was. Ah, you see, they've done all this now.
They've put
They've
some
put all
fencing
this
up there.
fencing. You see, there's some of the fencing here that would have gone across. Look, there's the original. There's the. Oh, yeah. Oh, there it is. Oh, it's not on this picture. There's the fence that would have been here.
Yeah.
Right, so if we stand here, so there's the fence that would have gone across,
Yeah.
and this picture would have been taken about here. Isn't it exciting?
That certainly is.
Right, I'm just going to pan in here and show you this. This is a picture of an N2 bunker first. In other words, it looks like it's the wrong way round, with a goods train coming up. In other words, it's coming from Luton up to Harpenden and onto Welwyn Garden City. You can see quite clearly the Midland embankment and the Midland Railway up the top there, which of course is still here. The fence residue of it is obviously still in situ, though by now the modern fencing of modern railways and safety is in situ. But this is a lovely picture because this was taken on this spot where we are now.
Brilliant.
Excellent. See, in situ there's another telegraph guide which would have been put in place to hold the telegraph poles up. Don't forget, these telegraph poles would have been quite old, and some of them would probably get a bit unsteady, so they would have driven these into the ground, cables up to the top just to support them. And you can see quite clearly now we are now in a cutting, riding along the original track bed, going towards the lower Luton Road, the bridge number 19 and 18, very similar, very close together, which is the River Lee, and then into Luton Hoo itself. So here we are now at bridge number 19, which went over the lower Harpenden Road. At the time, the road was called the B651. As we get to the other side, we'll show you a picture of what the bridge was like. That was taken out in the early 1970s. In the 1990s, Sustrans put a new bridge in, which we're about to walk over now.
And some of you will remember the very first video I ever did, where Callum, when he walked with me, declared he was hungry at this point.
Yeah, I was a growing lad.
And we've been walking like 10 minutes. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's quite a blessing, this bridge, actually, because before this put in, you had to cross over the lower Harpenden Road, which at this point is a bit dangerous, because as you can see, it's on an S-bend.
Yeah.
So whichever way you look, you're on a blind corner, and cars really do speed along this road. Cable theft in this area. This is the bridge as it used to be. You can see quite clearly you've got brick abutments either side and plate girder which went over the top. Again, I'm not sure if this would have been the original bridge, because most bridges at the time would have been brick arch. But again, this could be an original bridge that they put in the 1850s. As you can see, the road curves underneath in an S shape. Now, this was always a bone of contention, and once the bridge was no longer used and the decking taken down, in the early 1970s, this brick abutment here was completely removed and the S bend was smoothed out so the cars could have a clearer run. Part of the brick abutment this side is still there now, but obviously it's well underneath, and I'm afraid it's camouflaged now with a lot of foliage. But this is bridge number 19 on the old B651. We carry on walking from bridge number 19 and we come very, very quickly to bridge number 18, which is over the River Lee. The railway itself crossed the River Lee 3 times as it meandered through on its way down to London. The first one was in Luton itself. This is the second bridge, and now and then the third bridge was just before we get to Wheathampstead. As we walk along, obviously the foliage is now well grown over. We can see just down there the remnants of a telegraph pole. Now we cross the bridge itself. This is how the bridge looked soon after the track had been lifted. You can see it's concrete with metal uprights and metal stays just to keep the trains secure and safe. Believe it or not, they are still here today. Unfortunately, it's all behind metal fencing.
So we're wandering along. We're having a lot of problems with light exposure because it's such a sunny day. But here we can still see, you can see them just behind.
This bridge was actually built in 1964. When they did all the concrete fencing, they also rebuilt the bridge over the River Lee at great expense. Of course, that meant that at the end of the year, when they did an audit, they realised that the line was costing them more money than it was actually making. So what did Beeching do? Close the line.
I was going to ask you actually, Andy, they're saying now that when the railways expire for their contracts, or if they underperform now, they're going to come back as British
Yes,
railways.
come back into public ownership. Basically what happens is now, there is a national forum which owns the track. Right, with the railways in the country at the moment, it's like you driving your car on the road. You don't own the road, but you own the car. Companies like Virgin, the Virgin Voyages, they don't own the railway or the stations or anything. They just own the trains that run on their track, and they're allowed to by governments and through laws. Now,
So-
if they don't perform, the government can take the contracts back.
So are you saying then that the track itself and the land is still owned by the government like it did with British
Yes,
British Rail?
Yes, it is. The Strategic Rail Authority is a government-run body, still is, and the government hire out contracts to railway companies to run trains under the auspices and the understanding that they will run trains to a timetable. They'll keep to that timetable, and they'll run trains properly. If
Gotcha.
they don't, they're in breach of contract, really.
So
We know things go wrong. Unfortunately, you get suicides. You do get bad weather.
Yeah.
You get
long leaves on the track. Yeah.
long. Yeah, exactly. So there are things that do go against the railway companies, but primarily, most of them do run quite well, but they are monitored.
So effectively, in the next 5 years, then, when all their contracts are up, it'd be back as British Railways.
Absolutely, it could well
BR.
be back under government run. In other words, owned by us,
Wow.
the general public. Yes, that could happen.
That could be interesting.
In this picture, you can just about see the bridge over the River Lee, which we've walked down. Now we're going slightly downhill, but unfortunately we cannot follow the track bed anymore because it's now part of East Hyde Sewage Works. But what we're doing now is walking behind the original plate layers hut and then walk up to the station just around this way. The plate layer hut is still there.
And the door is open, but I'm not climbing over that to show you what it looks like.
I don't think you can get in there anymore either.
It would be ouch. So
I don't
yeah.
think it's got a roof either. Standing in the same location today, this is the view you would have had 50, 60 years ago. Today, part of the sewer works.
Yeah, very much overbuilt with greenery. But if you know where we are, we're coming up to the station. We're just walking through and we're now exactly on the track bed. And in the distance, you can see the brake. Hey, I went down the hole. Let's try that again. So, and typically we're filming and there's a car coming, which is fantastic. So we'll need to move backwards so that we're safe. There we are. Okay.
That's a policeman.
Well, yeah, we think that was a police officer
I think it
in plain
was.
clothes. Surprised he didn't ask us what we were doing. I would have
Just say a little bit about the bridge, can I?
Yeah, sure. You're on
All right.
record.